I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about is could you talk a bit about when you were first diagnosed with bipolar?
Yeah, I was 18 years old. I had just made the really just brilliant decision to drop out of university. I'd been there for 3 weeks, and I had a really difficult time with the teacher prof student ratio. It was a real hard thing for me, and being around that many people was a bit of anxiety as well. So I wasn't altogether comfortable. I left school and also decided to stop drinking at that time, which if ever you're 18 years old and you decide to stop drinking, you're going to lose about 3/4 of your social circle. It's just natural consequence. It's going to happen. It's a byproduct. So that's what happened with me. Lost all my friends with this decision to quit drinking. I became very disconnected and wasn't around my friends and lost that social piece. So then, with the removal of alcohol, kind of a common occurrence is some depression can occur, and depression definitely occurred with me. I was, exhibiting all the classic symptoms of depression. I was laying in bed for 14 hours a day and watching TV for the rest of it, and not eating very much food in between. So it was a really unhealthy pattern that I got into, bit of a cycle, and my mom recognized it and was like, "We got to get you over to a doctor." And so I went to this doctor, and very quickly he was like, "You are definitely experiencing depression." And so everybody in the room kind of agreed on that. And after that, he prescribed me a medication, an antidepressant, at an introductory dose, which is what doctors do. And then what happened is he asked me to, because of where I was at and things, he wanted to keep a closer eye. So he said, "Come back every 2 weeks and we'll just keep an eye on things and you can report back." So I was doing that, but every 2 weeks I was going in there and I was like, I got no changes to report. I'm still sleeping 14 hours a day. I'm still watching TV. I barely eat. This is where we're at. And he's like, "Okay, we're gonna double the dose." Okay, great. So I take those for a few more weeks, right? A couple weeks. Get in there again. Let's double the dose. There's no change, right? So it got up to this dose that was, I guess, a high dose. And um, at that time, I began experiencing mania. Like I was maybe not obviously, but I was not aware I was experiencing mania, but I was. And again, more classic symptoms of that. So what I used to always question is like, what came first, the chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? Was my mania induced by this medication and this doctor's care, or is it just something that was naturally occurring and just happened to show up at that date and time? So that used to be a real thing for me. I used to like be my mission to be like, "F you system, because you did this." That's when I was like 20, but was a thing. So basically, I didn't receive a official diagnosis of bipolar until about, I would say, 3 months after that initial onset of mania, maybe 2 months, pardon me. I had about a 2 month tear of mania and manic behaviors that left me with like a lot of broken relationships, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of shame, a lot of humility that I carried with me for a long time. So that wasn't altogether pleasant. After that 2 months, I ended up going to hospital at the request of my mother, and my doctor, obviously. And so, in going into hospital, that's when I was assessed and given my diagnosis of bipolar. So I was 18 at that time. Yeah.
Do you think that the depression medication kept having to be doubled because it was bipolar? Like, do you think it was a more severe depression in a way because it was bipolar?
That's really difficult to say because in in my time with bipolar, the depressive episodes are always like, the question is like, I've received often is, which one's worse, a depressive episode or a manic episode? My answer has always been a manic episode, to be honest. And that's because of what I mentioned earlier, the destruction of relationships. I'm a very person-centered person. And human connection is really important to me. So if I'm breaking those relationships, that's very hurtful for me. So um, do I think that, because the other thing is like there was a lot of circumstances involved with that initial depression, right? So the circumstance of me not being in school, that's a big decision. Me losing all my friends, that's a big decision. So there's a lot of circumstances attributed to that. Was it more so? I can't say really one way or the other.
That's
To
fair.
be fair. Yeah.
How did um how have you, I guess, could you explain just like the people probably have some sense, but the symptoms of bipolar disorder?
Yeah, so there's the bi, meaning two from Latin, the Latin root. Bi, meaning two. So you have your basically your polarities, right? So your depression and your mania. And so I guess the symptoms of depression I kind of already talked about for myself that I've experienced are the excessive sleep, very little to no appetite, um, and then very little social connection. Like kind of as I mentioned that piece before, like if I'm not connecting socially, that's a really good example of a symptom being present. So, and then on the other side of it, on mania, things like I I hate to say like looking back on my manic admissions and episodes that like I'm textbook, but a lot of my stuff and symptomology has been textbook when it comes to that, right? Like um the sleeplessness, right? The exact opposite, where I'm sleeping for like 2 hours a night, feeling completely rested, and having like just beyond energy. Endless energy actually is what I would describe it as. So um and the sleeplessness, and then like the with the spending of money, right? Like buying maybe not frivolous but really unnecessary things. I can think to a time when I bought 3 couches for my basement, just because I wanted to have my friends sit in stadium stacked couches to watch wrestling. I thought that was important. um so yeah, like just really unnecessary things, poor decision making, I would say.
How have you learned to adjust your life over time with having bipolar disorder?
Well, I've definitely given it a lot more attention in the last 18, 19 years than I ever did. When I say gave it attention, I mean like I gave it some conscious thought, right? Like what is going on for me here? And, how how is what am I doing that's affecting the way I'm thinking and feeling, right? So with bipolar, I mean the whole thing of it is for me is that a lot of people view it as illness, or they will say I am bipolar.
Hmm.
That kind of language really bothers me. I prefer the phrase I live with bipolar. People don't say I am cancer, I am diabetes, right? Like you are not your condition, you are not your disorder, you're not your diagnosis. You're a human who lives with something. I think that's important to point out. Yeah.
So do you find that you have to make decisions based on having that illness that maybe otherwise you wouldn't? Could you talk a bit
Yeah.
about that?
Oh yeah. This is awful. So for me it's awful. Like it's a bit of a thing. So for the longest time, like since about 19 years ago, like when things that's around the time kind of my manic episodes had slowed up.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like sleep has always been the biggest thing, right? Like you gotta sleep, you gotta sleep. That's the biggest thing for your mental health. You gotta sleep, sleep, eat. But sleep is the biggest thing with bipolar, is what I was always told, right? So to this day, I don't mind sharing with you. I go to bed at 10 every night. I go to bed at 10 every night, and I wake up every day at like 7, maybe 6:30. But that's like honestly, it's almost ingrained, and it's a bit of an OCD thing as well, to be honest. But it is a bit of a thing that's been instilled in me, like truly instilled in me. When I was 18 and I left that hospital, my doctor at the time sat me down and said, "You have a life of a disorder that demands rigorous attention. You will not have a family. You will not work full time. This demands your attention, and this will be your life." And that's what I was told. And I believe that. Like, I honestly, like, for until I worked full time and had kids and a family and all that. But that fear, that level of fear that was instilled in me when I was 18 in that hospital was a very scary thing. And it was very, like, impounded, like, just right into my brain. So I've carried that with me for a long time. And I honestly think this, it may sound silly, but going to bed at 10 is, a very long remnant of that. But, a little bit of that, you want to make sure, and you don't want to go back, and you don't want to do these things. And so kind of the old stuff.
Um, could you talk a bit about what medication is like?
You know what? I just found out since 1998, I've taken 28 different medications. And I was like, had no idea. But I was doing this research and I went to all the pharmacies that I'd had since that time. And I was surprised to learn that. Um, and sorry, Dan, what was your question? Sorry.
Just could you talk a bit about what medication is like for you?
Well, right now, actually, in my life, I've had a medication change about 4 months ago that left me with the least amount of medication I've had since I was 18. So my doctor looked at what I was taking and decided that, some of these were put on to you when in times of crisis, and we just never took them off. So after that assessment, he took these off, and it's been nice. It's just been like, I'm still taking medication, of course, but it's just less. And my overall clarity of thought, I'm really enjoying. I just feel a bit more, just more clear during the days. I drink less coffee in the morning because I don't need to wake up as much from taking the meds the night before, kind of thing. Um, yeah, and I still, like, I take an injection as well. I get an injection of a medication called Abilify. So I get that every 3 weeks. Actually, next Thursday I'm going for mine. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you're asking, maybe you're not asking, but I'll just let you know. I am, I guess I'm a proponent of medication. I'm someone who's in favor of medication. I'm not maybe not someone who's like, pushing medication, but I'm certainly not someone who's oppositional to the idea of medication or the idea that people do or do not need to be medicated. I think it's very much a personal choice, but I'm certainly not opposed to the idea the way I think a lot of people in mental health can be, or society, I guess you could say, right? That type of attitude.
Um, could you go over your, like, however in depth you want to, but your hospitalization history throughout your lifetime?
Uh, well, I've had 14 hospitalizations since 1998. I can't believe how many times I've said 1998 already. It's phenomenal. But yes, 14 hospitalizations since 1998. I'd one in Moose Jaw for a month. Um, I would say the admissions from 1998 till 2005 were based in mania. And then ones following that have been the majority of those for depression. And that's something I learned actually in my last admission, is that as you get older with bipolar, you often experience more depressive episodes than manic episodes. So for me, as I mentioned earlier, my disdain for a manic episode, that's kind of nice for me to hear. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the hospitalization history, that's the history. I can tell you I've seen a lot of differences there from 1998 to 2020 when I was there last. Um, the level of compassion and just overall like therapeutic care um, is like next level, and you can't. It's not even you can't even compare the two to 1998. 1998, every nurse on that floor was just trying to stop a fist fight from happening, and it was about to, and it did, and it was like, yeah, it was a hard place to be. It wasn't like constant, but the looming threat of violence was always there, and like you saw it often, and it was not a pleasant thing at that time. Now, like these problems still present, no doubt, but I think they handle them very differently. And the overall attitude of healthcare is completely different when it comes to mental health. You know, like there's such compassion now that wasn't there before, right? It was this thing, you're over there in the corner, right, with your diagnosis. And think, I like when I was a kid, the only mental health or mental illness I knew about was depression. That's from my mother. She had depression. And one particular commercial that was about depression, right? These were my two only exposures to it. Now my kids are taking emotional regulatory teachings at their school. Um, like it's a very different landscape than it was 30 years ago, or whatever, right? So yeah, yeah, I think that's, in terms of growth, like, people say what they want about healthcare and like, archaic and whatnot, but that's, if you want to look at one area of healthcare that's had a tremendous amount of growth, I think mental health would be the one. Yeah.
Um, do you think that your mental illness has played a role in your creativity?
Yeah, I do. I think, yeah, I do. I definitely do. I can think of like, say what I want about these manic episodes. There's, I've written so many things during manic episodes, some of which I've kept right along the way, but so many that I've lost, like just stuff I've written and written and written and written. So was that helpful for my creativity? I mean, I think after those episodes, it was, because I can still go back and pull lines in to put into songs from those times, right? I can remember, how's that go? So dope, I make a silent monk say word, right? And I came up. I remember coming up with that. I remember where I was, and I thought, this is the greatest line I've ever come up with. Um, so there's times you can pull from that time, but yeah, it's it's a slippery slope, so to speak. Yeah.
That's fair. Um, why did you choose to step away from music recently?
It was not doing what it used to do. It was not doing what it used to do. And then like, so that's just the base, right? Like it wasn't overall as fun as it once was. I like things that are fun. And for me, that was like the most fun thing. Like it was so fun. Not even so much the top to bottom, the process, exactly what I'm talking about, the process, getting it out there, um, doing it, working it, whatever, like shopping it around, whatever, doing all those things. Like it's all fun, but like for me, I'm not gonna be that guy who sits here and tells you that I'm an artist from Regina and I hit the ceiling and I could never go any further than I did. But there's a part of me that does feel that way. And I think, as especially being a hip hop artist in Regina, that's been a challenge for many for eons. Well, maybe not eons, but you look at the long list of rappers who have left this city and gone on to do great things. Danny, Def 3 for sure, right? Like Def 3 is out in Vancouver right now, living his life, making a living off doing music, and that's awesome. Like that's so cool to me. And the people he's worked with, like it's crazy to me. But I think what he did is he recognized where he lived and that he couldn't make his dream work in this region, you know? And I'm not saying, I'm not comparing myself to Def 3 or anything. I'm just saying, like, I think I can think of other rappers who have gone on to do bigger things in other cities than they would have done here due to the ceiling, you know? And I did say in an interview with CBC, I said, half jokingly, it's a young man's game. I'm 44 years old. I got like, who wants these bars? Just me and my kids, really, right? Like, and that's fine by me. Like, we got bars, but like, like, do I want to go rap over the triplet? No, I don't. Do I have you know what though? Yeah, I stopped doing music, but I got a body of work now. It's behind me. It's a body of work, and it's there. I can look at it if ever I want to. I haven't looked at it in 4 or 5 months, but it's there, right? And that's kind of cool. So it's like that's one. It's also something I did for quite a while. I did it for about 8 years and put solid efforts into it. Now, again, I'm not saying I feel defeated by anything. It was a wonderful experience. Met so many cool people and got to do a lot of cool things. Um, but yeah, overall, wasn't that fun anymore.
Um, I don't pay that much attention to Kanye, but I have to ask you, like, what are your thoughts with him? And he has bipolar. What are you when you see him kind of like acting out in public, if you do see him acting out in public kind of thing, like what do you think of that?
I've never seen him in public myself, but I'll tell
Well,
you what I
like
think. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'll tell you what I
he
think.
doesn't come to Regina Rap.
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I don't know. But okay. Here's my thing. I am not gonna like. Yeah, okay. My whole position on this is I was very upset for a very long time with the world. And I still am, actually. I still am, because what did the world do when Kanye was acting out in like 10 years ago? 10 years ago, we're talking about, even if that math's right, but a long time ago, right? So, what was the world doing? Jimmy Kimmel's there making Kanye jokes. Conan O'Brien's making Kanye jokes. The whole world's making Kanye jokes. He's crazy. Kanye's crazy, right? And everybody just made jokes for like a number of years. And we can sit here and say, yeah, his handlers and the people close to him didn't step in. And I kind of feel that way too. Like, I don't know how I would have been handling that situation. He looked pretty volatile. But like, we're making jokes about this guy. He's out here suffering in front of us. And we're all just making jokes and saying he's crazy. So that really upset me. That really bothered me because that's a level of like, it's just disgusting to me. It's like because I know how much that hurts for him. So to compound that with the laughs of the globe at you, right? While he's just like continuing to do his thing, right? And like everyone's feeding that. Um, yeah, I thought that was a really messed up situation. Now, my son happens to enjoy early Kanye West music. My son's 14. Exceptional taste in music. He brings Kanye to me. I say, okay, I don't know what to do here. What's the play? My son says, we're going to like up till Kardashian. So pre Kardashian Kanye, that's his preference. Now, I don't know where I stand on it with the things he said recently. I can't even speak to them because I haven't even heard them. I've heard of them, but I haven't heard them, so I'm not going to speak to them. But yeah, I think overall it could have been viewed and handled so differently, right? And now like I've seen a few interviews with him and he looked to be doing okay at that time, but it's just it's a tough thing to watch. When it was happening, it was really hard to watch because I knew like, and I don't know, like I don't mean to sound like I don't think I'm the only one who was like, yeah, this gentleman's having a mental health issue, right? Like I think the whole world knew that, but what was being done about it? And it was like we were just laughing. We were just laughing, right? So yeah, that's my Kanye trip.
Um, what would you want to say to just an average person about bipolar disorder?
Well, I think the most important thing, well, I hope we're past this talk, but it's nothing to be feared. I hope we're a little bit past that, but in case we're not, it's nothing to be fearful of. It's it's a mood disorder and it's common. A lot of people have it. Um, but yeah, it's nothing to be fearful of. And there's a lot of like, it's not a disqualifier. You don't need to meet someone who's bipolar. You need to have concerns about like if you should talk to them again in your life or those types of thoughts. These are just some people living with bipolar, right? So, uh, let's live with together and not live apart.
Um, what do you think about, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so answer this however you want to, but it seems like that depression and anxiety in particular are being treated or viewed much better generally. Um, how do you feel about how bipolar and schizophrenia, or just bipolar, are still viewed?
I think because, like, honestly, like on the other side of this Kanye coin, like the level of awareness around bipolar is probably larger than it maybe has been in a long time, right? There's a lot of uh, high profile people now declaring that they have bipolar, which is, I think for me, I remember actually being 18 and getting this diagnosis, and these nurses coming to me and being like, well, it's going to be okay because Robin Williams has bipolar. Wow, that's super helpful. Sidebar, that's awesome because now I have something in common with Robin Williams. But that's not so helpful for me, right? But I think the overall like societal acceptance of mental health is much larger, and therein, the acceptance of bipolar is also, I think, on the level with that level of acceptance. Um, I don't think it's, you know, vilified or stigmatized maybe the way it once was. So I think that's definitely some growth as well.
Do you think having bipolar disorder has been a blessing in some ways?
It's tough to say that, but yeah, it has. It's hard to say that because I've had a lot of hard times with it. Um, it's allowed me to have a perspective, you know, it's allowed a perspective that I wouldn't have had I not gone down this path, obviously. But I do have this perspective now, and it's definitely like a grateful perspective coming from a point of like thankfulness and appreciation. Like I have a number of friends who died by suicide, and that's horrific. And it's also like I didn't. I'm here today, you know, and I appreciate that. So there's lots of things to be thankful for. There's also a lot of things I could be very resentful for, right? Like that darn doctor when I was 18, or you know, the number of nights in a lonely hospital room. Like those are hard nights for me. That's the ultimate disconnection. That's the place, like that's the darkest place. So I'm grateful to not be there today for sure.
Um, could you talk a bit about, if you like, you don't have to, but just how bipolar has factored into relationships, um, or even work environments, however you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think like both of those things have been affected by my bipolar. I've definitely had to leave employment due to symptomology. Um, I've had relationships end. Um, I would say, like, I can't speak to exactly why, but definitely my symptomology and my illness being active has definitely ended relationships for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, on the other hand, like, you know, there's been times in my life of great wellness, and during those times, I've had fruitful relationships and great connections, and so you know, I'm grateful for those as well.
Um, just a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. Do you have any spiritual beliefs?
Um, well, if I don't answer that quickly, it makes you think I don't. But I think my spiritual beliefs are just of maybe universal law, right? Like not necessarily karmic, but the governing laws of the universe, right? Like um, I think we are in control of what we create, and I think we can manifest these things. And I think the I don't want to call it the fun, but the joy in that for me is the practice of that. I haven't I can't point to anything today that I like in this day that I've manifested, or you know, some great thing has happened other than speaking with you,
Of
obviously.
course, of course.
This is tops. Uh, but like in saying that, like, um, if we're in charge of what we create and we can create what we want, then why not have what we want? And then this actually notion has been coming to me lately is I have what I need. Anytime I'm like, oh, I want to go get this, I want to go get that. I have what I need. That's not in the way of restraining spending. It's just in the way of acknowledging it. I have what I need. Like, so that helps with I feel like my appreciation for things these days as well.
Um, and then how do you reconcile having bipolar disorder with your beliefs in like universal law?
Well, if I really wanted that, I would just say it's meant to be in the most generic way, right? Like in the most casual philosophical term, right? Is meant to be like if I wasn't like it everything on this path before me, um, every lonely hospital room, every like full wedding I was at that I my wedding that I was in, right? Or every divorce from that wedding, or all of those things, 14 hospital admissions, 28 medications, um, all of these things, like you've heard this before from other people, but you'll hear it from me right now. I wouldn't be me if I didn't have those, right? And I wouldn't. And like, I'm learning that I'm kind of an all right person. So if I'm kind of an all right person, those things behind me have to be all right as well. And I have to be all right with them because here I am and I'm pretty cool with that today. So yeah,
I feel like that's a good place to end it. Um, it would be great to have you over at the house for supper sometime if it fits into the schedule. But
that'd be wonderful.
yeah. Thanks for talking to me today, though.
Yeah,
Some
thanks,
great
man.
answers.
Cheers.
Yes, you as well.
Okay, have a great day.
Yes, you too.
Okay, see ya.
Bye bye.